Hi, I'm Samantha Leone, and in this presentation, I'll be discussing how Whole Foods Market has handled communications amid the COVID-19 crisis, a crisis that has affected virtually everyone across the globe. Now, according to Bloomberg's Matt Day, while the foot traffic decline at Whole Foods has been much steeper when compared to industry competitors, sales have actually increased by about 10% during the pandemic, and Whole Foods hasn't been forced to close its doors. But Whole Foods has still been highly impacted by COVID 19. And as a provider of essential items, Whole Foods did not have the luxury of taking its time to respond to the COVID 19 crisis at its initial escalation. Due to the novel nature of the deadly virus, Whole Foods had no way to cycle through a proactive phase to prevent the crisis in terms of conflict management. Amazon owned Whole Foods, which has nearly 500 stores in the US, Canada, and the UK, delved straight into the strategic phase of conflict management when the World Health Organization declared the COVID 19 outbreak a global pandemic on March 11th. 2 days later, on March 13th, Whole Foods entered into the reactive phase of conflict management, distributing a news release with this key message. We want to make sure you know what to expect when visiting our stores in the coming weeks, as well as how we're responding to the evolving coronavirus COVID-19 situation, both as a retailer and employer. We know that Whole Foods Market is more than a grocery store to many of you. It's a neighborhood hangout, a regular meeting spot, your favorite coffee bar, and most importantly, it's a place to nourish yourself and your family. We are committed to maintaining those standards during these challenging times. This communicated a flexible, realistic, and sympathetic orientation, and the statement was followed by a very effective show don't tell type of narrative with a detailed list of changes Whole Foods instituted to ensure the safety of its employers, customers, and products. I think the content in this initial news release helped set an authentic and transparent dialogue that allowed Whole Foods to maintain a favorable relationship with its audiences. Okay, so Whole Foods did not respond to the crisis within an hour of the World Health Organization's global pandemic declaration, but it did embody several of the strategies from this week's lecture. It checked its facts, it made public safety the top priority, it expressed sympathy, and it included employees in its initial response. Additionally, Whole Foods implemented a central information center, a critical item that Wilcox, Cameron, and Reber suggest in crisis communication. Not only did Whole Foods create a timeline of news releases surrounding COVID 19, but it also created a COVID 19 response page on its website with 3 sections that users can navigate to that explain how it's serving its customers, how it's caring for its employees, and how it has altered store operations. That's a great central information center. Now, its strategy might be considered as corrective action in that it took steps to correct its approach to its operations amid the pandemic. Its response amid the first few months of the pandemic is a model that other organizations would be smart to adopt. Now, because Whole Foods responded so quickly, it did not need to engage in reputation repair, at least initially, but a sub-crisis arose amid the pandemic. Mike Snyder wrote that near the end of March, Whole Foods workers planned protests, claiming that they needed improved workplace safety and benefits like hazard pay and sick pay. Whole Foods retaliated with a response strategy that falls under the attack the accuser category. Whole Foods released a statement that said it was disappointed that a small but vocal group inaccurately portrayed the collective voice of its 95,000 team members. Whole Foods said in the statement that it saw no operational impact on the day of the planned protests. Additionally, it reiterated all it was doing to care for its workers, including increased overtime pay, paid sick time for workers in quarantine, and new and enhanced safety protocols. While the planned protests were a bump in the road for Whole Foods amid a continually evolving COVID-19 environment, in June, Whole Foods was named the top retailer for COVID-19 health and safety measures, according to a Consumer Health and Safety Index study. And beginning July 20th, Whole Foods required customers, along with employees, to wear face masks, offering free face masks to customers who didn't have them. And I think this action illustrates that Whole Foods is willing to go the extra mile and sets it apart from other stores. In the future, I think it will be important for Whole Foods to think twice before adopting a defensive strategy and to communicate key messages across all available communication channels. For instance, while the Whole Foods PR Twitter shared Whole Foods' initial March 13th news release in response to the global pandemic, the main Whole Foods social media accounts did not post anything until March 18th. And a delay like this could have compromised trust, strained relationships with key audiences, or resulted in financial losses. But ultimately, I think Whole Foods did a nice job navigating complex, uncharted territory amid an unprecedented pandemic. And I'll be interested to see the strategies Whole Food uses as it enters the recovery phase in its corner of the COVID-19 crisis. Thank you.